There is a question that lives in the back of the mind of almost every believer, and most of them will go their whole lives without saying it out loud. It shows up at 2 in the morning. It shows up in the third row of a church service, while everyone around you is singing and your mouth is moving and something inside you feels like it is standing outside the building, watching through the glass. It shows up at funerals. It shows up when someone you admired walks away from the faith entirely and seems happier for it. The question is simple. What if my faith is not real? What if I know the songs, and the prayers, and the language, and the arguments, and I have been fluent in all of it since I was a child, and underneath the fluency there is nothing alive? Almost 2,000 years ago, an old man sat down in a lamplit room in the city of Ephesus and wrote a letter to people who were asking that exact question. He was somewhere past 90 years old. His hands had pulled fishing nets out of the Sea of Galilee as a teenager. Those same hands had touched Jesus of Nazareth. He had leaned against him at a dinner table. He had stood close enough to the cross to be given a job by the man dying on it. Every other apostle was gone. Peter was gone. Paul was gone. His own brother had been killed with a sword decades earlier. He was the last man on earth who had seen it all with his own eyes. And the last thing that man did with his remaining strength was write a short letter, so that people like you would not have to spend their one life guessing. He put his purpose in a single sentence near the end. I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know that you have eternal life. So that you may know. That is the promise of this letter. And inside it, the old man left 10 tests. This is what they are, and what they will show you. Before we open the letter, you need to see the wound that made him write it. Ephesus, near the end of the 1st century, one of the great cities of the Roman world. Harbor traffic, marble streets, money, noise, and a temple to the goddess Artemis, so large it was counted among the 7 wonders of the world. Somewhere inside that city, a community of Christians met in homes, and somewhere among them was John, the son of Zebedee, the fisherman, the last living eyewitness. The traditions of the early church remember him in old age with a strange tenderness. They say that near the end, when he could no longer walk on his own, the believers would carry him into the gathering, and they say he had stopped preaching long sermons. He would be set down in front of the people, and he would say one sentence: "Little children, love one another," week after week. The same sentence. When someone finally asked him why he never said anything else, the old man answered, "Because it is the Lord's command. And if this alone is done, it is enough." Hold on to that image. We are going to come back to it, because the man who could be carried into a room saying nothing but love one another had not started out that way. There was a day, decades earlier, when a village refused to welcome Jesus, and this same John asked if he could call fire down from heaven and burn it to the ground. Jesus gave him a nickname for that temper: Son of Thunder. Something happened to that man between the fire and the sentence. The letter we are about to read was written on the far side of that change, by a man who knew from the inside what real transformation looks like, and what it costs, and how slowly it comes. But he did not write the letter because life was peaceful. He wrote it because his church had just been torn in half. We do not know every detail, We know what the letter itself tells us. And what it tells us is devastating when you slow down enough to feel it. At some point before John picked up the pen, a group of people stood up and walked out. People who had been part of the community. People who had sung the songs and shared the meals and prayed the prayers. Some of them for years. They had absorbed a new way of thinking about Jesus. A more spiritual version. A more sophisticated version. A version that did not require quite so much from the body or the wallet or the conscience. And when the community would not follow them into it, they left. John describes it in one of the most quietly painful sentences in the entire New Testament. They went out from us. Now picture the week after. Picture the room where the believers gathered, and the specific places where those people used to sit. The woman who always arrived early. The man with the loud laugh who had been there since the beginning. Their seats are empty now, and everyone left in that room is staring at those empty seats and being eaten alive by a question nobody wants to ask first. They seemed real. They knew everything we know. They said everything we say. If they could be that wrong for that long without knowing it, how do I know I am not exactly like them? That question is the reason 1 John exists. And here is why this letter has not aged a single day in 2,000 years. You have seen the empty seats too. Maybe it was a worship leader whose deconstruction story you watched unfold online. Maybe it was the friend from college who was more on fire than anyone you knew. The one who led the Bible study. The one you secretly measured yourself against. And who now speaks about the whole thing like it was a phase. Maybe it was your own father. Maybe the seat that scares you is closer than that. Maybe, on the worst nights, you are afraid the empty seat is going to be yours. Here is what you need to understand about the old man before you hear a single test. John watched those people leave, and he watched the fear spread through the ones who stayed. And he did not respond by lowering the lights and telling everyone they were fine. He also did not respond by turning the community into a permanent interrogation room. He did something much harder and much kinder than either of those things. He turned on a lamp, and he walked his people through the house, one room at a time. That is what the 10 tests are. They are 10 rooms with the light turned on. A test sounds like something you pass or fail at a desk, with a red pen waiting. That is the wrong picture. And if you carry it into this letter, you will miss what the letter is for. The right picture is a house at night, and a hand on the lamp, and light moving across one wall at a time. The lamp is in the house so that the person living there can stop guessing what is in the dark. The tests do not create life. They reveal it. John will wound false confidence on almost every page, and he will bandage trembling faith on almost every page. And he does both with the same light. One more thing, and it matters, because the title of this journey promises something bold, beyond all doubt. Let me tell you exactly what John promises and what he does not. He never promises that a real believer will stop feeling doubt. Feelings come in with the weather. What he offers is something sturdier than a feeling. He offers evidence, signs of life, the kind of things that remain true about you at 2 in the morning, whether you feel them or not. So here is the first thing the old man does. It tells you everything about him. He does not point the lamp at your sins. He points it at God, the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. That is the opening move of the whole letter. Before John examines a single human heart, he holds up the standard every heart will be measured against. And the standard is not a rule book. It is a person, and the person is made of light. And the first test is waiting, right there in the glow of it. Because the first thing light does when it enters a house is show you which rooms have their curtains closed. Picture two houses on the same street. The first house is nothing special. The yard needs work. There is clutter on the counter and a sink that holds yesterday's dishes. But the windows are open. The curtains are pulled back. When a neighbor knocks without warning, the person inside opens the door in whatever state the house is in. Because the house has nothing, it is organized around protecting. The second house is beautiful. Fresh paint, perfect lawn, warm porch light, and every curtain is closed. It has been years since anyone got past the entryway without an appointment. Inside that house, there are two lives running side by side. There is the life presented at the door, and there is the life behind the curtains. And the person who lives there spends enormous energy making sure those two lives never meet. Now hear the first test. This is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light. If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus his Son purifies us from all sin. Read that carefully, because the test is asking something different from what most people assume. It is not asking whether your house is clean. Look at the wording John chose. If we walk in the light, the blood of Jesus purifies us from all sin. People walking in the light still have sin that needs purifying. The dishes are still in the sink. The light does not find a spotless house. It finds an honest one. So, the real question of the first test is this: are your curtains open or closed? The man writing this had seen the light he is talking about. That is worth pausing on. There was a day on a mountain when John watched the face of Jesus begin to shine like the sun, watched his clothes turn whiter than anything on earth could bleach them, and fell on the ground in terror. When John writes God is light, he is not reaching for a lovely metaphor from the comfort of a desk. He is describing something that once knocked him off his feet. The old man is a witness giving testimony, and the testimony is that at the center of reality there is a brightness with no shadow in it anywhere. That is who you are dealing with. And that brightness is not stalking you. It is inviting you to live where it lives. Now let the light show you the counterfeit. Because every test in this letter has one. The counterfeit is fellowship language draped over a curtained life. And nobody on earth does this with more polish than people raised in church. You learn the vocabulary early. Blessed, praying for you, God is good. The words become a front porch. Warm and welcoming and completely disconnected from the interior of the house, there is a version of you that exists on Sunday morning. Generous, patient, lit up, and there is another operation running behind the curtains. The browser window that gets closed fast when someone walks in. The second set of numbers. The resentment cultivated for years and fed like a houseplant. The drinking nobody has ever seen. The private cruelty that only one person in the world, the person closest to you, ever witnesses. John calls that arrangement by an uncomfortable name. He says the person living it is lying. And notice who the lie is aimed at. It is barely aimed at the neighbors anymore. After enough years, The primary audience for the closed curtains is the person holding them shut. We lie, John says, and do not live out the truth. The darkness is not just a place where you hide things. It becomes a place where you lose track of what is true about yourself. Here is the part that should make you sit forward, because this is where the first test separates from every instinct you have about religion. Walking in the light does not mean you have nothing to hide. It means you have stopped building your life around the hiding. The believer walking in the light still stumbles, still falls into the same old rut on a bad Tuesday, still has rooms in the house they are ashamed of. The difference is the direction they face when it happens. Something has changed in their relationship to darkness itself. Concealment used to feel like home, and now it fits wrong, like a bed in a stranger's house. They can lie there, but they cannot rest there. There is a pull toward the window, toward air, toward telling someone, toward dragging the thing into the open, where it loses half its weight the moment light touches it. If you want to know whether the light has actually entered your life, that pull is the evidence. Comfort in the darkness is the mark of a heart the light has not reached. Discomfort in the darkness, that low restlessness that will not let you settle there anymore, is a sign of life. It might be the first sign of life most believers ever feel. And John attaches a promise to the open curtains that almost nobody sees coming. If we walk in the light, we have fellowship with one another, not just with God, with each other. Every person carrying a curtained life knows the loneliness that comes with it. You can be surrounded by people who love you and feel completely unknown, because the version of you they love is the version at the front door. The moment the curtains open, even a few inches, even to one trusted person, something happens that all the performance in the world could never produce. You are known, and being known in the actual house, with the actual dishes in the sink, is the thing you were starving for the entire time you were protecting the paint. So stand at the window of your own life for a moment and let the first test ask its question plainly. When God brings light toward an area of your life, and He will, He always does, watch what you do in that instant. Some part of you steps toward the light, or some part of you moves, quietly and automatically, to protect the darkness. Whichever way you lean, notice it. That lean tells you more about the state of your faith than 20 years of attendance ever could. But the leaning is only the beginning, because sooner or later the light lands on something specific, a real failure, with a name and a date. And in the 10 seconds after the light finds it, your mouth will do one of two things. What your mouth does in those 10 seconds is the second test. There is a moment every parent knows. You walk into the living room and there is a broken vase on the floor, and there is a child standing next to it, and the child has just heard your footsteps. Watch that child's face in the next 10 seconds. Something is happening behind those eyes, and it is one of the oldest calculations in the human story. The mouth is about to do one of two things. It is going to tell the truth, or it is going to start building a story. Grown men and women stand next to broken things every day of their lives. The vases get bigger. A marriage, a friendship, a reputation, a promise, and the calculation behind the eyes never changes. Truth or story. The second test of 1 John lives entirely inside those 10 seconds. Here is what the old man wrote. If we claim to be without sin, We deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us. If we confess our sins, He is faithful and just, and will forgive us our sins, and purify us from all unrighteousness. If we claim we have not sinned, we make Him out to be a liar, and His word is not in us. Now slow down, because this test contains the first great surprise of the letter, and it is the exact opposite of what most nervous believers expect. The person who fails this test is the one who claims to have nothing to confess. Think about who is probably watching this right now. Some of you clicked because you are painfully aware of your sin. It follows you around. You rehearse your failures at night the way other people count sheep. You assumed a video about testing your faith would be one more voice on the pile telling you that you fall short. And John looks straight at the other person in the room, the comfortable one, the one with the clean record and the steady explanations, and says that man is the one deceiving himself. Your aching awareness of sin, the thing you thought disqualified you, is closer to a pulse than a verdict. Dead things feel nothing. You are feeling everything. Hold that thought, because we will finish it before this chapter ends. First, the counterfeit, because self-deception almost never sounds like lying. It sounds like explaining. Listen to 4 voices. You have heard all 4. You may have used all 4 this week. The first voice says, I did nothing wrong. The vase was already cracked. The marriage was already cold. She provoked me. The numbers were basically accurate. This voice does not deny the wreckage. It denies ownership. The second voice says, everybody does it. It softens the thing by drowning it in company. Every man looks. Every business pads the invoice. Everyone talks about people behind their backs. At least I am honest about it. The third voice says, God understands my situation. This one is the most religious of the 4, and the most dangerous, because it recruits God Himself into the explanation. He knows how lonely I have been. He knows what my childhood was like. He knows I needed this. It turns the judge into a character witness for the defense. And the fourth voice says, I still believe. So this does not really matter. It treats faith like a membership card that keeps working no matter what gets charged to it. 4 voices, 1 job. Every one of them exists to get you out of saying a single sentence. I did it, and it was wrong. That sentence is confession. The word John uses simply means to say the same thing, to agree, to call the thing what God calls it, without a lawyer present. Confession is not groveling, and it is not a religious performance of misery, and it does not require you to feel a certain temperature of sorrow before it counts. It is just the moment your mouth and the truth finally match. And here is what should undo you about this test. Look at what John says happens next. He is faithful and just, and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness. Faithful and just. The old man chose those words with his eyes open. He watched the arrest. He stood within earshot of the cross. When John says God is just to forgive you, he means the debt has already been paid in full, and a just God does not collect the same debt twice. The forgiveness on the other side of your confession is not God going soft on the rules. It is God keeping His word, which means the 10 seconds next to the broken vase are not what you always feared they were. You grew up believing that the truth would cost you everything, so you built stories. because stories felt like survival. And the whole time, on the other side of the one sentence, you refused to say, there was a Father who already knew, whose arms were already open, whose forgiveness was already purchased and waiting for you to come collect it. The test is not whether you fall. Everyone in this letter falls, including the man who wrote it. The test is whether you can still call the darkness light after you have fallen. The explaining heart gets smoother with every fall. The confessing heart gets freer with every fall. 10 years from now, those two hearts will not even resemble each other. So notice what your mouth reaches for in the 10 seconds. That reach is the test. But words, even true ones, are still only words. And the old man knew exactly how much religious talk a human being can produce without anything underneath it. So the next test leaves your mouth alone entirely. It walks past everything you say, and everything you feel, and everything you post, and it goes looking for one thing only: what you do when doing the right thing starts to cost you. Every life is full of crossroads that no one else can see. A man sits at his kitchen table in April with tax documents spread out in front of him, and there is a number he could report, and a smaller number he could report, and no human being on earth would ever know the difference. A woman holds her phone, and the call she is about to make can be handled with the truth, or handled with something smoother that protects her position. A husband lies in the dark next to a wife he wounded with his words at dinner, and the apology is right there in his throat, and pride is sitting on his chest like a stone, and the whole marriage is quietly bending around whether that sentence gets said. No audience, no applause, no consequences visible from the outside. Just a fork in the road and a decision. The third test of 1 John is only interested in what you do at those forks. Here is how the old man puts it: we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands, is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Now, the moment some of you heard the word commands, a wall went up. You have been hurt by versions of Christianity that were all rules and no love. Systems where God was a supervisor with a clipboard and your salvation hung on your performance review. If that is you, stay with me, because John is about to say something that dismantles that entire system. Obedience does not produce the life. Obedience proves the life. Get the order right, and everything changes. Think of breathing. A living man does not breathe in order to become alive. He breathes because he is alive. Breath is what life does. Nobody has ever climbed out of a grave by inhaling. But if you want to know whether the man on the ground is alive, you watch his chest. The breathing is not the cause of the life. The breathing is the evidence of it. That is exactly the relationship John draws between obedience and knowing God. We know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. He is not handing you a ladder to climb. He is teaching you to check for breath. Now let the light show you the counterfeit. And be warned, this one lives comfortably in churches. The counterfeit is a person who wants a savior but has no intention of taking on a Lord. They want Jesus in the rescue position, forgiveness, comfort, heaven, help in emergencies, and they want the steering wheel left exactly where it is. Their theology is warm, and their knowledge is real, and their playlist is full of worship. And you can map their entire life without ever consulting God once. Because every actual decision, the money, the body, the ambition, the grudges, gets made by the same person who was making them before they ever believed. Jesus rides in that life like a passenger who is never once asked for directions. John looks at that arrangement and uses the harshest word in this letter, liar, not confused, not growing slowly. The claim of knowing God, sitting on top of a life that never once bends to Him, is a false claim. The old man had watched too many people say, Lord, with their mouths, while their feet never changed direction. And he loved his little children too much to let them die inside that comfortable contradiction. So, what does the real thing look like? Be careful here, because the real thing is not a perfect record. If the test were perfection, the letter would end with every reader condemned, including its author. The real thing is a transfer of authority. Somewhere along the way, the commands of God stopped being suggestions you weigh and became a word you answer to. They moved from the advice shelf to the throne. You still fail. You will fail at that kitchen table some April. But watch what failure looks like now. You cannot fail in peace anymore. The command still stands there in the room with you. And it outranks you. And you know it. And you come back to it. And you go make it right. A man under authority, and a man under his own authority, can commit the identical sin and be living in two different universes. And notice the strange, beautiful thing John attaches to obedience. He says, love for God is made complete in the one who obeys. Every parent understands this in their bones. When your child does the hard right thing, when you are not even in the room, tells the truth and takes the hit, returns the wallet, defends the kid, nobody defends. Something in your love for each other lands. It becomes muscle instead of sentiment. Words of love are the seed. Obedience is where the seed becomes a tree you can sit under. So find your own forks in the road. You know exactly where they are. There is at least one place in your life right now, and you did not have to search your memory to name it, where you already know what God is asking, and you have been in negotiations, explaining, delaying, redefining. The third test asks only this. At that fork, which way do your feet actually go? Is there any command of God you keep explaining away? Because obeying it would cost you a version of yourself you are not ready to bury. Your feet are telling you the truth about your faith. Listen to them. But the old man is not finished with your feet, because there is one command he cannot leave alone. He circles it in this letter the way a tongue returns to a sore tooth. He rises it, moves on, and comes back, again and again, more than any other subject he touches. It is the command he was carried into church, repeating when he had strength for nothing else, and it is the test that more American believers are failing right now, this year, than possibly any other test on this list. It is about the people sitting 3 rows away from you. Go back to the old man being carried into the room, the believers of Ephesus, lifting him through the doorway, setting him down in front of the gathering, the last living eyewitness, the man who could have told them anything, what the storm on the lake sounded like, what the bread tasted like on the hillside, what the empty tomb smelled like at dawn. He had a lifetime of stories no one else on earth could tell. And week after week, he spent his remaining breath on one sentence: "Little children, love one another." And when they finally asked him, "Teacher, why do you always say this, and only this?" he gave the answer that has survived 20 centuries. Because it is the Lord's command. And if this alone is done, it is enough. Now hold that frail old man in your mind, and set him next to the young man he used to be. Because there was an afternoon, some 60 years earlier, on the road through Samaria, when a village looked at Jesus and shut its doors. And it was this same John, young then, strong then, who stepped up with his brother and asked a question that should stop your blood. "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven and destroy them?" Destroy them. A whole village, women, children, old men behind those doors. That was John's honest instinct when people got in the way. And Jesus turned and rebuked him, and gave the two brothers a nickname that followed them for life: Sons of Thunder. The man who wanted to burn a village became the man with one sentence. That distance between the fire and the sentence is the distance this test is about, and nobody walks it overnight. It took John 60 years, so when he writes what he is about to write, he is not scolding you from a mountaintop. He is writing from the far end of a road he barely survived himself. Here is what he wrote: "Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness." And later, with the gloves fully off, "Whoever does not love their brother and sister, whom they have seen, cannot love God, whom they have not seen." There is no exit in that sentence. Read it 10 times and you will not find one. John does not permit the split that religious people have been attempting since religion began. The split where you keep your love for God upstairs, pure and warm and private, while the way you treat actual human beings rots in the basement. He walls off every escape route. If the hatred is alive, the claim is dead. You cannot love a God you have never seen while despising the brother standing in front of you, because the brother standing in front of you is where your love for God becomes visible or is proven to be a rumor. Now, the counterfeits. This test has more of them than any other, because nothing on earth is easier to fake than love, and nothing is faked more often in church. The first counterfeit is loving humanity in general, while being unable to stand humans in particular. There are people whose compassion works beautifully at a distance. They weep for strangers on the news. They give to causes on other continents. Their theology of love is flawless. And 3 rows away sits a specific man with a specific voice that grates on them, a specific opinion that offends them, a specific history with them, and their heart toward that one man is a locked room. Loving mankind costs nothing. Mankind never borrows your truck and returns it empty. The test was never mankind. The test has always been the man. The second counterfeit is the one tearing American churches apart right now. And I am going to say this carefully, without naming a single party or politician, because the letter is older than all of them and will outlive all of them. Congregations are quietly resorting themselves. There are people who worship the same Jesus, confess the same creed, await the same heaven, who have stopped speaking to each other over how they voted. You know which pew you stopped saying hello to. You know exactly when it happened. And if you are honest all the way down, the wall between you is not theology. Somewhere along the way, a political identity climbed into the seat reserved for a spiritual one. And now a brother looks like an enemy because a screen told you he was one. John's words fall on that arrangement like a hammer. If the hatred is alive, and dressed up disgust is still hatred, the person holding it is walking in darkness and does not know where they are going, because the darkness has blinded their eyes. His words, not mine. The third counterfeit is using correct doctrine as a license for coldness. Some of the cruelest sentences ever spoken inside churches were technically true. Truth wielded without love does not reveal the light. It just gives the darkness better vocabulary. Now, before the real thing, one door has to be opened with great care, because some of you are sitting behind it. Some of you were hurt by the church itself, not by the world, by the people who sang about grace, a pastor who prayed, a congregation that protected the wrong person, a community that dropped you the moment your usefulness ended. And you hear a chapter about loving other believers and something in you goes cold, because the believers were the wound. So hear this clearly. This test does not require you to hand yourself back to someone who is not safe. Wisdom can keep a distance. Boundaries are not hatred. A woman who will not sit across from the man who wounded her has not failed this test. The test is about what you feed. Protection guards a wound so it can heal. Hatred keeps a wound open on purpose. Revisits it, nurses it, builds a life around it. One is a bandage. The other is a shrine. John is not asking you to tear off bandages. He is asking whether somewhere in your house there is a shrine. So what does the real thing look like? John answers with brutal simplicity. Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and in truth. And he gives the measurement in the same breath. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Sees the need, has the means, closes the heart. That is the anatomy of failing this test. And notice that it requires no hatred at all, just a comfortable looking away, which means the real thing is embarrassingly concrete. It is a casserole on a parche. It is showing up with a truck on moving day. It is the phone call to the difficult person that you dial with a knot in your stomach. It is forgiveness spoken out loud, with the actual words, to the actual face. It is money leaving your account with a name attached instead of a cause. Love in this letter always has an address. So here is the question, and let it get specific, because this test is useless in the abstract. A name has already surfaced in your mind during this chapter. It surfaced 2 minutes ago, and you have been managing it since. That name is not an accident. John does not ask whether you love the idea of Christians. He asks what happens in your heart when a real one, that one, becomes expensive to love. The Son of Thunder learned, which means it is learnable. That might be the most hopeful fact in this entire letter. But John is not finished with your heart, because hatred is not the only thing that pulls a heart out of position. There is something else, something that never feels like darkness at all. It feels like sunlight and progress and everything you have worked for. It smiles at you from catalogues and commencement speeches. And the old man is about to name it as a rival to God himself. Picture a kitchen at midnight. It is a beautiful kitchen, an island of white stone, pendant lights, a refrigerator that cost more than his first car. The house around it sits in the right zip code, and the cars in the garage are the right cars. And upstairs, a family sleeps in comfort that 2 generations ago would have looked like royalty. And at the island, in the dark, sits the man who built all of it. He is holding a glass of water he is not drinking. He got everything on the list, every single thing. And tonight, in the quiet, he finally has to admit that the hum in the walls of his life is emptiness. And he cannot figure out where it is coming from, because he did everything right. The old man in Ephesus wrote this man a warning 2,000 years early. Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, love for the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. Now be very careful here, because this test is misread more than any other, and the misreading has done real damage. When John says the world, he does not mean the planet. He does not mean mountains, music, food, laughter, work, or the people you love. God made all of that and called it good. And this same John wrote in another book that God loved the world enough to send his Son into it. So the world in this warning is not a place, it is an operating system. It runs underneath everything, silent as software. John names its 3 background processes, and they have not been updated in 20 centuries because they have never needed to be. The craving of the flesh, appetite promoted to authority, the body's wants running the whole life, the craving of the eyes, the endless acquisition of whatever enters the field of vision, the itch that every catalog and every feed is engineered to scratch, and the pride of life, the resume, the image, the hunger to be seen standing on top of something, appetite, acquisition, applause, 3 processes, running day and night. And here is the unsettling part. They run just as smoothly inside religion as outside it. A ministry can run on applause. A theology degree can run on pride. The system does not care what content it wears. And the counterfeit this test exposes may be the most American counterfeit in the whole letter. It is the dream with a cross painted on it. It is a life whose actual blueprint came entirely from the operating system. The house, the numbers, the status, the retirement chart, with God brought in afterward as a contractor. Prayers become work orders. Bless my plan, protect my plan, accelerate my plan. And it can look devout for decades. Church every Sunday. Gratitude at every ribbon cutting. But run one test and the whole thing shows its skeleton. Interrupt the plan? Let the deal collapse. Let the diagnosis come. Let the applause move to someone younger. And watch what happens to the faith. If the faith dies when the plan dies. The faith was never in the Father. It was in the plan. A God who exists to bless the life you already designed is not the Father. He is staff. John gives one devastating reason to defect from the operating system. And it is not that pleasure is evil. It is that everything the system promises has an expiration date stamped on it. The world and its desires pass away. He had lived long enough to watch it happen. He had seen Jerusalem fall. He had outlived emperors who were worshipped as gods and were now statues with bird droppings on them. Every trophy the system awards is made of ice. You can win it, you just cannot keep it. And the man at the midnight kitchen island is not depressed because he failed. He is empty because he succeeded. And the ice is melting in his hands. And some part of him knows it. So what does passing this test look like? It does not look like selling the house and moving to a hut. John never tells his people to exit the world. He tells them to change what they love. The believer who passes this test still works, still builds, still enjoys a good meal and a good kitchen. The difference is gravity. The world used to be the sun. Their whole life orbited. Now it is just weather, sometimes lovely, sometimes brutal, never the center. Money is a tool now, not a scoreboard. The applause is pleasant now, not oxygen. Something has reversed in their chest, and things that used to own them are now merely things they own. Here is the question that finds the truth. If God removed the applause, the comfort, the image, and the success, all of it, tonight, would your heart still want him? Or would you discover that you never actually wanted him? Only the things he was carrying. Sit with that one. Do not answer it fast. Now, stop for a moment, because 5 tests in, you may have noticed something about this old man, and I want to hand you the key to the whole letter before we go further. John keeps circling. Light, then sin, then obedience, then love, then the world, and if you look ahead, he circles back again. He is not rambling. He is not an old man repeating himself. He is weaving. Everything in this letter hangs on 3 threads. What you believe about Jesus, how you walk, how you love, truth, obedience, love. 3 threads, braided over and over, each pass going deeper. And here is why he weaves. Instead of listing, 1 thread can be faked. A man can hold perfect doctrine with a dead heart. 2 threads can be forced for a while. Discipline and warmth can be performed. And the performance can fool everyone, sometimes including the performer. But 3 threads, braided together, across years, under pressure, in the dark, when no one is watching, cannot be counterfeited. That braid is what the letter is looking for. And the next test pulls the first thread tight, because before anything else can be weighed, one question stands at the door of the whole faith. And the people who walked out of John's church had answered it wrong. Who, exactly, is Jesus? Go back to the empty seats one more time. The people who walked out of John's church did not walk out because they stopped being religious. That is the detail that changes everything. And it is the detail most people miss. They left more religious than ever, at least in their own eyes. They left talking about deeper knowledge, higher truth, a more spiritual understanding than the simple fisherman's gospel they had outgrown. They did not abandon Jesus on their way out the door. They took a Jesus with them, an edited one, from what the letter itself tells us. Their Jesus had been improved in all the ways human beings have been improving Jesus ever since. He was more spirit than flesh, less blood, less body, less carpenter, a Christ of pure light who only seemed to be human. because surely the divine would never actually sweat, or bleed, or, hang on, Roman wood with splinters in his back. It was a cleaner Jesus, a more manageable Jesus, a Jesus who asked nothing of the body, which meant, conveniently, that what you did with your body no longer mattered much. And the old man watched that Jesus walk out the door, wearing the name of the one he had actually known. And something in him rose up, because John was the one man left alive who could stand in that doorway and say the thing no philosopher could argue with. I was there. Listen to how he opens the entire letter. Before a single test, before a single command. These are the first words out of his pen, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched. This we proclaim concerning the word of life. Heard, seen, touched. Those are not the verbs of a theologian building an argument. Those are the verbs of a fisherman giving testimony. A man does not say, our hands have touched about an idea. John had heard that voice go hoarse, teaching crowds all day. He had watched those hands break bread and had eaten the bread. And after the resurrection, on a grey morning by the lake, he had sat by a charcoal fire and eaten fish that the risen Jesus cooked with his own risen hands. You do not eat breakfast cooked by a ghost. When the new teachers said the Christ was too spiritual to have real flesh, John did not reach for philosophy. He reached for memory. I touched him. I watched him die. I ate what he cooked afterward. That is the bedrock this whole letter is built on, and it is why the sixth test exists. Here is how he writes it. Who is the liar? It is whoever denies that Jesus is the Christ. And later, this is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not acknowledge Jesus is not from God. Come in the flesh. 3 words. And the whole faith stands or falls on them. Because a Christ without real flesh is a Christ without a real cross. And a Christ without a real cross has paid for exactly nothing. And your confession, and your forgiveness, and your 2 in the morning hope all die together in that subtraction. Now walk with me through a gallery, because the editing never stopped. Every generation builds its own managed Jesus, and the American showroom is full of them. Look at each one closely. Ask yourself which one you have shaken hands with. Here is Jesus, the moral teacher, cour table, safe, framed on the wall, next to Gandhi and Lincoln. He said lovely things about kindness, and he demands absolutely nothing, because a teacher can be admired without being obeyed. His sayings decorate a life that never once changes course because of him. Here is Jesus, the flag bearer. He belongs to a side, and remarkably, it is always the side of the person holding him. His opinions track the owner's opinions with perfect accuracy. Left or right, he blesses whatever his people already wanted to do, condemns whoever his people already wanted to condemn, and never, not once, turns around and confronts the hand that carries him. A Jesus who never contradicts you is not leading you anywhere. You are leading him. Here is Jesus, the vending machine. He exists to dispense health, contracts, parking spaces, breakthroughs. Faith becomes currency. Prayer becomes a transaction. And the relationship lasts exactly as long as the machine keeps paying out. The first long silence, the first unanswered year, and the customer moves on. because customers do. And here is Jesus, the ornament. He hangs at the neck, sits on the shelf, appears in the wedding and the funeral, beautiful and silent. He is consulted on nothing. He is simply part of the decor of a life that would look identical without him. 4 counterfeits. One common feature: every one of them can be managed. Every one of them fits inside a life without rearranging it. And that is precisely how you know they are counterfeit. Because the Jesus of this letter, the one whose voice John heard and whose flesh John touched, rearranged every single life he ever entered. Fishermen left boats. Tax collectors repaid fortunes. A man came down from a tree and gave away half of everything he owned by dinner. So here is the 6th test. Stripped to its center, the question is not whether you admire Jesus. Every generation admires Jesus. The question is whether the Jesus you follow is allowed to contradict you. Sit with your own Jesus for a moment and check his hands. Does he ever tell you no? Has he ever cost you anything? Real money, a real relationship, a real ambition. Has he ever demanded something that your politics, your appetite, or your pride wanted to refuse? When did his word last override your preference? And if you cannot remember a single time, to be honest about what that means. A Jesus who always agrees with you is a mirror, not a Lord. The real one comes in the flesh, which means he comes with a voice that is not yours, a will that is not yours, and a cross that is not a metaphor. Confessing him is not reciting a fact about him. The word John uses means to say the same thing, to agree out loud, to align your whole life with who he actually is. The demons, John's friends would remind us, know the facts and tremble. Confession is the fact plus the surrender. But this raises a question that John, of all people, refused to leave hanging. If there are counterfeit Christs, and there are, then there are voices carrying them. Persuasive voices, gifted voices, voices quoting scripture with tears in their eyes. The people who walked out of Ephesus were led out by teachers, and the teachers did not sound evil. They sounded inspired. So how do you tell the difference? How does an ordinary believer, with no seminary degree and no dead languages, weigh the voices pouring into their ears? The old man saw that question coming. The next test is his answer, and no generation in the history of the world has ever needed it more than yours. In the ancient world, there was a profession built entirely on distrust. The money changer sat at his table in the marketplace, with coins moving through his hands all day long. And some of those coins were lies. Forgers were good. They mixed cheap metal into silver, shaved the edges, copied the stamps of emperors. A careless money changer was a poor money changer. And then he was no money changer at all. So he developed habits. He weighed each coin on his palm. Because false metal carries false weight, he bounced it off the table and listened. Because pure silver rings and alloy thuds, he knew the true coin so deeply. Its weight, its ring, its face, that the false one betrayed itself the moment it touched his hand. Notice what he never did. He never tried to memorize every forgery. There were too many. And next month there would be new ones. He mastered the genuine article and let every counterfeit measure itself against that. Now hear the 7th test. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit. but test the spirits to see whether they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Gone out. Mark that phrase, because you have heard it before. It is the same phrase from the wound at the beginning of the letter. They went out from us. The empty seats and the false voices are the same story. The people who left did not scatter into silence. They became teachers. They found audiences. The voices multiplied. And if the voices had multiplied by John's day, consider where you are standing. You live in the first generation in human history, with unlimited religious voices on demand. A believer in Ephesus heard a handful of teachers in a lifetime. You can hear 100 before lunch. Sermon clips, podcasts, prophecy channels, devotional feeds. Strangers with confident faces explaining God in 60 seconds. Some of it is gold. Some of it is shaved metal with a beautiful stamp, and all of it arrives in the same scroll, at the same volume, with the same production quality, pouring into your ears while you drive, while you cook, while you fall asleep. John's command lands on that flood with 2 words. Test them, not consume them, not rate them by how they make you feel. Test them. The way a man tests a coin when his family's dinner depends on not being fooled. But first, look at the 3 ways people get fooled. Because the counterfeits of this test are not voices. They are habits of listening. The first habit is believing whatever inspires. If it gave me chills, it must be God. If I cried, it must be true. But chills are cheap. A movie trailer can produce them. Inspiration measures a speaker's skill, and nothing else. Some of the most dangerous men of the last century could hold a crowd breathless. Goosebumps are not a test. They are a response. And responses can be manufactured by anyone who studies how. The second habit is mistaking intensity for truth. The louder voice, the more certain voice, the voice with no doubt in it anywhere, must know something, except that certainty is a performance style, not a credential. False coins often shine brighter than honest ones. That is the point of the shine. The third habit is the shield of private revelation. God told me. 3 words that end every conversation. Because who are you to argue with God? John's readers heard it from the teachers who split their church. You have heard it too. And notice what the phrase does. It moves the claim out of reach. It cannot be weighed, cannot be questioned, cannot be tested, which is precisely why it is the forger's favorite stamp. A word that refuses all testing is not humble. It is hiding. So what is the test itself? Here is where John is kinder than you expect. He does not hand his little children a seminary curriculum. He hands them a coin. This is how you can recognize the Spirit of God. Every spirit that acknowledges that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. The standard is Jesus, the real one, the one from the last chapter. Flesh and cross and lordship and all. That is the true coin. And every voice gets bounced off that table. Does this teaching lead me toward the Jesus who actually is? The one with authority over my life. The one who contradicts me. The one who bled. Or does it lead me toward one of the managed ones? The vending machine, the flag bearer, the ornament. Does this voice make sin smaller and comfort larger, and me the center of the story? Weigh it. Listen for the ring. And there is a second sound to listen for. And John gives it a few lines later. He says of the false teachers, "They are from the world and speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. Some voices are enormous for one reason only. They are telling the world exactly what it already wanted to hear. The crowd is not a credential either. It is sometimes the loudest warning of all." Now, one caution before the question, because this test has a ditch on both sides. Some believers here test the spirits and swallow nothing, trust no one, and turn their faith into a permanent heresy, trial where every teacher is guilty until proven perfect. That is not discernment. That is fear wearing the uniform of discernment. The money changer did not burn his table down. He kept changing money. He stayed in the marketplace, open-handed, and simply refused to be fooled. Discernment keeps you at the table. Suspicion drives you from it. So here is the seventh test. And be honest, because this one hides in a place most people never look. Think of the 3 or 4 voices you trust most. The preacher you never miss. The podcast you never question. The channel that feels like home. Now ask the question John is actually asking. Do you test those voices? Or do you trust them because they were already saying what your heart wanted to hear? When did one of your trusted voices last say something that cost you, corrected you, contradicted you? If every voice in your feed agrees with you, you have not found good teachers. You have found a mirror with a sound system. 7 tests now. 7 rooms with the light turned on. And I know what is happening to some of you, because it is what happens to honest people. 7 rooms into this letter. You are keeping score against yourself. The curtains, the excuses, the fork in the road, the name in row 3, the midnight kitchen, the managed Jesus, the unweighed voices. The list is getting heavy, and a quiet dread is starting to circle. The very dread you brought to this video in the first place. Stop for a moment. Put the scorecard down. Because the next thing the old man writes is not a test. It is the reason he wrote all of them. And it may be the most healing sentence in the entire letter. Picture 2 children growing up in the same house, under the same father. Watch the first child come home in the evening. He comes through the door like a man entering a courtroom. Before his bag is off his shoulder, he is reading his father's face, scanning for weather, calculating. Every conversation is a performance review. Every mistake is evidence for the prosecution. He is not a bad kid. He works harder than anyone. But if you could see inside his chest, you would find a stopwatch and a scoreboard and a low humming dread that never fully shuts off. Because deep down, he believes his place in this house is rented, and the rent is due every single day. Now watch the second child come home. Same house, same father, same rules. By the way, this child has broken things too. She has been corrected, more than once. And some of those corrections stung for weeks. But watch her come through the door. She drops the bag. She calls out to see who is home. She walks into the kitchen where her father is standing. And there is not one atom of the courtroom in her. She has bad days and she has failures. But underneath all of it, there is a floor that never moves. She knows something the first child does not know. Or rather, she knows something the first child also knows, but has never once believed. She is loved, not graded. Loved. Same father. 2 completely different lives. And the difference between those two children is the 8th test. By now, 7 tests in, I know which child some of you have become. You came to this letter afraid your faith was not real, and you have been using every test as a fresh count of the charges, the curtains, the excuses, the name in row 3. You have turned the old man's lamp into a searchlight on a prison wall. So before one more word, hear what John actually wrote. Because he saw you coming 2,000 years ago. God is love. Whoever lives in love lives in God, and God in them. This is how love is made complete among us, so that we will have confidence on the day of judgment. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Read the direction of that passage. It is moving somewhere, and the destination is not terror. The destination is confidence. John is not tightening the screws in this section of the letter. He is loosening them. After all the tests, all the light, all the exposed rooms, the old man leans in and tells you the point of everything he has written. And the point is that his little children would stop living like the first child. He wrote a letter full of tests so that you could stop being afraid. That sentence sounds like a contradiction until you remember what the tests are for. A man who has actually checked the locks sleeps. A man who refuses to check them lies awake all night, guessing. Now, this test has 2 counterfeits, and they sit on opposite ends of the same hallway, and both of them will steal your life. The first counterfeit is the religion of the stopwatch. It is the first child grown up. It fills pews everywhere, and it looks impressive, because fear is a powerful fuel. It serves on every committee. It never misses a Sunday. And it is not love. It is terror wearing a volunteer badge. And John says the one who lives there is not made perfect in love, no matter how full the schedule is. Fear can imitate almost everything about devotion except the joy. The second counterfeit swings the opposite direction. It hears no fear in love and turns it into no examination ever. A blanket assurance that asks nothing, checks nothing, and calls every uncomfortable question legalism. I prayed a prayer when I was 8, so the case is closed forever. Live and let live. But John cannot mean that, because John wrote 10 tests. The confidence he offers is not the confidence of a man who refuses to look. It is the confidence of a man who looked. So what is the real thing? Stay close now, because this is the part that heals. The real thing is not the absence of doubt. Doubt is weather, and weather visits every house. Inside John's own circle of friends, there was a man named Thomas who missed the first resurrection appearance and flatly refused to believe the others. Unless I put my finger where the nails were, I will not believe it. And here is the detail that should sit beside your bed for the rest of your life. When Jesus came back a week later, he did not shame Thomas out of the room. He walked straight to him and held out his hands. The doubter got the closest look. If your dark nights of questioning proved that a person did not belong to God, that story would end very differently. No, the real thing is a change in the direction you run when you fail. That is where the 2 children finally separate. The first child fails and runs from the father. He performs, waits for the anger to blow over. The second child fails and runs to the father, because somewhere along the way She learned that his love is not the reward at the end of her goodness. It is the ground she was standing on the entire time. That direction, toward him instead of away from him, on your worst day instead of your best one, is what perfect love driving out fear actually looks like in a human life. Nobody performs that. It only comes from being loved and slowly starting to believe it. And John gives you the reason the floor holds. We love because he first loved us. Your grip on him was never the thing keeping you safe. His grip on you was the whole time. So here is the 8th test, and it is the gentlest question in this letter. When you picture God right now, tonight, after everything this journey has surfaced, do you picture a face you want to run toward, or a verdict you are bracing for? These tests were never meant to leave trembling believers standing outside the door in the cold. They were written to show them they are already inside the Father's house. But do not mistake the warmth of that house for softness. Something happens to people who stop being afraid, and the world has never known what to do with them. Take away the fear of punishment, and you take away the world's favorite handle. The child who knows she is loved cannot be bribed with approval or herded with dread. And there is a word for what that turns into. John calls it overcoming. On the coastlines of Northern California, there are trees growing where no tree has any business growing. They stand on the cliff edge above the ocean, in thin soil, in salt wind that never stops. The wind has been working on them for 100 years, and you can see the whole argument written in their bodies. They are bent. They are scarred. Whole branches grow sideways, because growing upward was never an option in that wind. Not one of them looks like the tall, straight pines in the sheltered valleys. And every morning, when the sun comes up over the water, they are still there. The wind that should have killed them 1,000 storms ago has instead revealed them, root by root, as the strongest trees on the coast. Nobody would put one of those trees on a poster about victory. And that is exactly the problem with our posters. Here is what the old man wrote. Everyone born of God overcomes the world. This is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. Who is it that overcomes the world? Only the one who believes that Jesus is the Son of God. Notice something strange in the grammar, because John hid the whole secret there. He does not say everyone born of God will eventually overcome. Someday, after enough effort. He says the victory has overcome. Finished. Accomplished. He is not describing a prize waiting at the end of your performance. He is describing something you were carrying the whole time. Something that came into you the moment you were born of God. The way a child born in a free country does not earn citizenship. She wakes up inside it. The battle is real. The wind is real. But the outcome is not riding on your strength. And that changes what victory even means. Which brings us to the counterfeit. And this one has an American accent. Somewhere along the way, victory got translated into the vocabulary of the operating system from the midnight kitchen. Overcoming came to mean climbing, bigger house, better health, growing platform, rising numbers, a life that photographs well. There is preaching all across this country right now that promises exactly that. Victory as upgrade, faith as a lever for getting more of what the world was already selling. And measure that promise against the actual people in the actual story. The man writing this letter was in his 90s, exiled at one point to a prison island. Every friend of his youth executed. Paul overcame the world from inside a rented room with a chain on his wrist. If victory means comfort and applause, then the apostles lost, and the martyrs lost. And the persecuted church on 3 continents is losing right now, and heaven is somehow filled up with losers. No, whatever John means by overcoming, it is not that. And be suspicious of anyone whose gospel requires you to be impressive by the world's own scoreboard. Because using the world's scoreboard is simply obeying the world with religious music playing. There is a second counterfeit, quieter, the mirror image of the first. It talks constantly about victory while living in total captivity. It has the language of triumph and a life run entirely by fear of man, hunger for approval, dread of missing out. The vocabulary is conquering. The nervous system is conquered. So what does real overcoming look like? Go back to the trees. Overcoming, in this letter, does not mean the wind stops. It means the wind stops deciding who you are. The overcomer still stands in the same gale as everyone else. The same pressures, the same temptations, the same economy, the same diagnosis rate, the same grief. The difference is at the root. The world presses on them with its full weight, and something at the center refuses to be moved off of Jesus. And that refusal, John says, is faith. Not faith as a feeling of certainty. Faith as allegiance under pressure. Faith as the root that holds when everything above ground is bent sideways. You have seen this and maybe never named it. The businessman who tells the truth and loses the contract and sleeps that night. The young woman who stays kind inside a workplace that rewards cruelty. The couple who keep a vow through the year that nearly broke it. The father standing at a graveside who somehow, the following Sunday, is back in the pew with his hands open. Not because the pain is small, but because his roots go under the pain. None of these people look victorious. Every one of them is scarred and bent and growing sideways. And every one of them is still there in the morning. The world threw its weight at them and did not get what it wanted. That is what overcoming looks like from the outside, weathered and standing. So here is the 9th test, and let it search you when the world presses its full weight against your soul, and you know your own pressure points, the money, the approval, the fear of being left out or left behind. What inside you refuses to bow? Is there anything in you that the world cannot buy, cannot scare, and cannot flatter into surrender? That refusal has a name. John says it is the life of God in you, holding, and if you found even a small root of that refusal in yourself just now, bent and scarred as it may be, take heart. Small roots in strong wind grow deep. Now, the letter is almost over. The old man has walked you through 9 rooms, and the lamp is burning low, and you can feel him beginning to set down the pen. Every letter in the ancient world ended the same way, with greetings, with blessings, with names. Grace be with you. Greet the brothers. Farewell. John does none of it. Instead, with no warning and no explanation, he writes one final sentence, 5 words in the original language, and stops. For 2,000 years, readers have turned that last page and felt the abruptness like a hand on the shoulder. Scholars have puzzled over why he ends there. Of all places, but the old man knew exactly what he was doing. The thing you say last is the thing you are most afraid they will forget. Here is how the letter ends. Little children, keep yourselves from idols. That is it. That is the last line. No farewell. No greetings to the brothers. No grace be with you all. Every other letter of that age closed with the ancient equivalent of a signature and a wave. John closes with a warning. 5 words in his own language. And then silence. For 2,000 years, readers have reached the end of this letter and felt the floor drop slightly. The way you feel it, when a father walks you all the way to the door, says everything a father says, and then, just as you step outside, catches your shoulder one last time. Wait, one more thing. The thing a man says with his hand on your shoulder at the door is the thing he is most afraid you will forget. Now, on the surface, the warning seems to belong to his city and not to yours. John's readers lived in Ephesus, and Ephesus was the proudest idol town in the Roman world. The temple of Artemis stood there, one of the 7 wonders, 4 times the footprint of the Parthenon. Marble columns rising like a forest of stone. Pilgrims poured in from every coast. Silversmiths ran a whole economy, stamping out little shrines and little goddesses to take home. A believer in that city walked past idols on the way to buy bread, idols on the corner, idols in the market, idols on the neighbor's doorpost. Read the last line in that setting, and it sounds almost practical, like a mother telling children to look both ways. But that reading has a problem, and the problem is the rest of the letter. John has just spent 5 chapters saying almost nothing about statues. He has been talking about light and darkness, love and hatred, truth and denial, the world and the Father. His whole concern has been the invisible architecture of the human heart. And a man does not spend his final page suddenly changing the subject, which means when John says idols, he is not finally getting around to the marble. He is naming everything he has already described. He is telling you what all 10 rooms had in common, because in the oldest language of Scripture, an idol was never just a statue. An idol is anything that sits in the chair reserved for God. En person, any possession, any dream, any fear that takes the weight your soul was designed to rest on Him alone. The statue was only ever the visible receipt of an invisible transaction. The transaction is the idolatry, and that transaction has never once gone out of style. Your generation did not stop making idols when it stopped carving them. It just moved production inland, out of the marketplace and into the chest, where the craftsmanship is harder to see. So walk through the modern temple for a moment. No marble anywhere. Look what sits in the chairs instead. A career can sit in the chair, not the job itself. The job is fine, but the identity built on it, the nameplate that answers the question of who you are, so that a layoff does not just cut your income, it unplugs your soul. Children can sit in the chair, and this idol is made entirely of love, which is what makes it so hard to see. A parent whose whole inner weather depends on a child's success, a child's approval, a child's staying close, has placed on that child a weight no human being can carry, and both of them will feel the crushing eventually. Safety can sit in the chair, the account balance that functions as a nervous system, the insurance against every imaginable tomorrow, guarded with an energy that used to be called worship. A nation can sit in the chair. A flag can. A movement can. And you already saw In an earlier room, how a brother starts to look like an enemy the moment that transaction clears. Your own image can sit in the chair, the version of you that must be maintained in every eye that sees you, an idol you carry into every room and polish 100 times a day. And now the hardest ones, the ones John, of all people, would not let his little children miss. Religious things can sit in the chair. A ministry can be an idol to the person whose worth rises and falls with its attendance. A theology can be an idol to the person who loves being right about God more than he loves God. Even the feeling of being a solid believer, the reputation for faith, the spiritual resume, can quietly replace the Father it was supposed to honor. The most dangerous idols are not the ones that pull you out of church. They are the ones that sit in the pew with you. Here is how the counterfeit works in real time. And this is the mechanism to watch for. Nobody renounces God in words. The mouth stays orthodox to the end. The idolatry runs underneath the vocabulary. In the order of operations, when the fear comes, where do you run first? When the emptiness opens up, what do you reach for first? The man whose God is his savings does not stop praying. He prays, and then he checks the number. And only one of those two actions actually lowers his heart rate. The woman whose God is her image does not skip worship. She worships, and then she checks how the worship looked. Some of the most tragic prayers ever prayed are prayers asking the true God to protect the real one. Lord, bless my idol. Keep my idol safe. Do not let anything happen to the thing I actually live on. So here is the 10th test. And it is the deepest cut in the letter, because it does not ask about your beliefs at all. Your beliefs have been tested already. This one goes underneath them. The final test is not what you say you believe. It is where your heart runs when it is afraid, empty, wounded, or alone. Watch yourself in the next hard moment, and you will meet your God. Whatever you reach for, before you reach for the Father, whatever comforts you faster than His presence, whatever loss would make your life feel over, that thing is wearing a crown in some room of your house. John spent his entire letter, and his hand is on your shoulder at the door right now, to make sure the crown ends up on the only head that can carry it. Little children, keep yourselves from idols. And then the old man put down the pen. The lamp is still burning. The letter is finished. 10 rooms, 10 beams of light, and one question left standing in the middle of the house. It is not a question John asks you. It is the question that explains why a dying man spent his last strength writing at all. Come back to the room in Ephesus one last time. The lamp has burned low. The old man sets the pen down beside the finished letter and flexes the hand that wrote it. The same hand that pulled nets out of the Sea of Galilee 3/4 of a century ago. The same hand that touched the word of life. The traditions of the early church remember one more thing about John, and it is worth carrying with you. Of all the apostles, he was the only one who was not killed for the faith. Peter was crucified. Paul was beheaded. His own brother James was the first of the 12 to die by the sword. John alone was allowed to grow old. The young man who once stood close enough to the cross to be given a mother now sat in the lamplight as the last eyewitness on earth. Hair white, hands unsteady, heart still awake. The son of thunder, who wanted to burn a village, had become an old father with one sentence left. Little children, love one another. He did not write 10 tests because he enjoyed examinations. He wrote them because he was leaving. And a father who is leaving does not fill his last letter with riddles. He fills it with the things he cannot bear for his children to guess about. John had watched a generation of believers stare at empty seats and torture themselves with a question that has only two possible endings: false peace or false terror. And he refused both endings. He put his purpose in plain words near the close of the letter. I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know that you have eternal life. So that you may know, not so that you may hope on your good days, not so that you may perform harder. No. So gather the whole journey into your hands now, because from the end of the house you can finally see all 10 rooms at once. He asked whether your curtains are open or closed. He asked what your mouth does in the 10 seconds after the light finds a failure. He asked which way your feet go at the forks in the road nobody sees. He asked what happens in your heart when a specific brother becomes expensive to love. He asked whether the operating system of appetite, acquisition, and applause is still writing your blueprint. He asked whether the Jesus you follow is allowed to contradict you. He asked whether you weigh the voices or swallow them whole. He asks which child you are when you walk through the Father's door. He asked what part of you refuses to bow when the wind hits. And with his hand on your shoulder at the doorway, he asked where your heart runs when it is afraid. 10 tests. And here is the truth about them. One final time. These tests do not create life. They reveal it. They were never 10 doors you have to unlock one by one to earn your way in. They were 10 windows into one house. And the question was always the same question, wearing 10 different faces. Is the life of God actually in you? Because where that life is present, it behaves like life. It leans toward light. It confesses. It obeys. It loves. It loosens its grip on the world. It clings to the real Jesus. It weighs what it hears. It runs toward the Father. It stands in the wind. It keeps the chair empty for God alone. None of it perfectly. All of it truly. Life is like that. A newborn does none of it well and all of it really, which leaves only one thing. And you knew it was coming. The letter has been read. The lamp is in your hand now. So, honestly, before God, where are you in this letter? Some of you are behind the curtains. You have been running 2 lives for so long that the management of the gap is your full-time occupation. And tonight, something in you is tired, in a way that sleep has never fixed. Hear this. The light you have been hiding from is not your enemy. The same light that exposes is the only light that cleanses. And it has never once been used on a person who stepped into it willingly except to heal them. You do not have to clean the house before you open the curtains. You open the curtains, and the cleaning finally becomes possible. Start with one trusted person and one true sentence. That is walking in the light. That is how it begins. Some of you are staring at an empty seat. Someone you loved. Someone you measured yourself against. Got up and walked out of the faith. And you have been quietly bleeding ever since, wondering if you are next. Hear what the whole letter was written to tell you. That fear you carry is not the evidence against you that you think it is. The people who walked out of Ephesus did not lie awake, grieving the possibility that their faith was not real. They were certain. It was the ones who stayed who trembled. Your trembling means The thing being questioned matters to you more than almost anything on earth. And things do not matter like that to the dead. Some of you failed the fourth test tonight, and you know the name. It surfaced in that chapter, and it is still sitting there. You have kept that hatred alive so long it feels like part of your skeleton. Then look one last time at the man who wrote the command. He wanted to burn a village once, women and children behind the doors, and he asked for the fire, and Jesus turned and looked at him. 60 years later, they carried him into church, and he had one sentence left. And it was about love. The road from the fire to the sentence is long, and it is real, and it is open. And the first step is not a feeling. It is a prayer you may have to force through your teeth. Lord, I do not love them. Begin there. He did. Some of you came to this letter braced for a verdict, and somewhere in the middle of it, a strange thing happened. You felt peace, not because you passed all 10. Nobody passes all 10 clean, but because, as the lamp moved from room to room, you kept recognizing something, the lean toward the light, the direction of your running, the refusal in the wind, signs of life, imperfect and unmistakable, like a heartbeat under a stethoscope. If that is you, then receive what the old man wanted you to have more than anything. Stop guessing. The letter was written so that you may know, and now you know. Live like a child who is home. And some of you reached the end and found nothing. The tests did not reassure you. They emptied you. Room after room, the light found no life. And you are sitting with the possibility that the fear was correct all along. That the faith was language and habit and nothing underneath. If that is you, hear the last thing, and hear it clearly. The fact that you can see the emptiness means the light is already inside the house. Dead things do not grieve their deadness. And the God of this letter is not standing over you with a verdict. He is standing at the door where the others walked out. And the door swings both ways. And the same Jesus who cooked breakfast for the man who denied him 3 times is not going to turn away the one person in the room honest enough to admit the truth. The letter has no interest in leaving you condemned. It wants you born. Ask him for the life itself. He has never once refused that prayer. The lamp is burned down now. The letter is folded. Somewhere in Ephesus, a long time ago, they carried an old man home from the gathering. And not long after, the last eyes that ever saw Jesus of Nazareth in the flesh closed for the final time. The empty seats in that little church were eventually filled again, and the letter he left behind outlived the temple of Artemis, outlived the empire that exiled him, outlived every voice that walked out the door, and crossed 2,000 years and an ocean to find you tonight, exactly where you are, with exactly your question. 2,000 years ago, the last man on earth who had touched Jesus with his own hands sat down and wrote you a letter, so that you would not have to spend your one life guessing. He wrote it so that you may know. Do you?